Hey there everyone. So for today's video, I'm going to be covering 3D printing, one of my passions, and I'm glad to be doing it here with you today and for the Eco Library. So if you don't know, a 3D print is a little object made out of, typically it's made out of plastic, but this here is an example of one. It's kind of a keychain looking thing. It's got my name on it, as you can see. And the cool thing about 3D printing is it acts a lot like regular printers. We send a file to a machine and we click print and it prints a thing for us. But in our case, it's a three-dimensional thing. So as I'll mention later in the video, there's a few ways to get a 3D model to send to a 3D printer. But for today's video, I'm going to show you how to create your own 3D model. So to do that, we are going to go to tinkercad.com, and I will now show you the rest of the video of kind of the steps you go through with Tinkercad to make a 3D model like this. So let's get into it. So first place we need to go is tinkercad.com. You can type it in on the search bar. You'll find your way there. So Tinkercad is a really good tool for learning intro to 3D modeling. It's very rudimentary and you can do a lot with just some basic shapes, whether it be to render something cool or to 3D print it. So we'll just need to sign in. And there's a lot of options. If you have a Google account, like a Gmail, you can create one with Autodesk or with your Microsoft or Facebook account. So just pick your option and find a way to sign in. So once we've signed in, you'll see this is kind of the main page it takes you to. It's called a dashboard. You've got different kind of modules and options you can go to, some resources for you to learn new things. But this is kind of just your main area where your models go. When you create a new design, it'll show up here as a separate project. These are just project files, and you can access them from anywhere once you sign into your Tinkercad account. So to make our little name tag that I showed earlier, we'll just go ahead and click Create New Design. And it'll take a few minutes, but it's going to load us into a blank slate new project scene. So like in all 3D modeling programs, you've got kind of a three-dimensional virtual space you're working with. And typically the first thing you want to learn about a program, because there are a lot of different types of 3D modeling programs, is how to navigate the space. I'm just using the scroll wheel to zoom in and out first, right? Learn how to zoom in and out. A big one is how to rotate. In our case with Tinkercad, it is going to be the right mouse button. So as we click and hold the right mouse button, we can rotate around the space. Okay. Now, if we hold Shift, the Shift key on the keyboard, while we hold the right button, we can pan around the space. So really learning how to navigate is going to be super useful for getting a good layout of and kind of perspective of what you're working on. So now that we've played around with our motion controls a little bit, our navigation controls, we can just start to make something. So over here on the right is your basic objects. You're going to be placing basic objects or basic shapes into the space and merging them together in different ways. So we're primarily going to be working in this space. If you click on this drop-down menu, you got some other options for different types of shapes. Connectors are nice because these are already 3D print tested connectors. So if you need to make a connection between two joints, like maybe an arm and a leg, to their main pieces of their body, of maybe an action figure, that's kind of a cool thing too. One more thing too is if we click this button that says Edit Grid, we can change the dimensions of the models we're working with. We've got inches and millimeters. Bricks are their own measurement. I think with 3D printing, we're going to stick with millimeters, and then you just hit update grid if you made a change. That way you know that when you're placing objects, you know how big they are on millimeters. So we're just going to place a box. We just click and drag from this space into this space. Now you don't need a mouse to use this program, but it definitely helps. So like if you're using a laptop, you can still use a laptop. It just may be a little bit more of a different experience for you. So we have a cube, okay? First virtual 3D object. If you put your mouse over any of these dots, click and drag, you can change the shape. Kind of like in Microsoft Word, when you have a picture, you can just click the four corners of the picture to make it bigger or smaller, right? Same concept. Now, you'll notice that when I hover over one of these dots, these black lines show up with some numbers. These numbers are how big each side is of the geometry. So if we just click on it, it'll stay, and we can edit these numbers. So let's say you're exploring, right? You want to edit how big this is. We'll click on it. Now it can stay, and we can edit the dimensions, okay? So I'm going to make this about 70 millimeters long, okay? Again, we can click our box to maybe give it, put it in view for us. Okay, so I'm going to make it 70 long, and I'm going to make it 40 going this way. Okay, and actually, since I can edit things, I think I'm going to go down to 30. Let's see. Yeah, 30 looks a little bit better. So we got 70 and 30. Another dimension we have to think about is the height here of this object. Now you'll find in more advanced modeling programs that they coordinate these dimensions with three variables. So there's the x and y, which is going this way and going this way of this coordinate plane. And then the z dimension, z as in the last letter of the alphabet, z is usually going like the height of something, so going up and down. Just to keep that in mind. So this one's set at 20. I like it at 20. That's kind of a good size for our little keychain. And if you need to kind of get a reference, have a ruler handy so that you can kind of check, oh, 20 millimeters is this much and 70 millimeters is this much. So that'll definitely keep you kind of focused on how big you're making this. All right, so we've got a nice little rectangle. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to drag a cylinder from our basic shapes into the scene. All right, we got our basic cylinder. And what we're going to do is we want to overlap the cylinder with this to kind of create a curve, because we're going to combine these two objects. So we've already matched the height of this one. So they're the same height. So if I were to just drag this in here, just like that, great. So now I'm just going to drag this out a bit, just so it kind of, and you know what, it doesn't really have to be perfect. Looks like I got a 30 by 30. So for future reference, we can just use that dimension key for a hole if we'd like. Also some quick shortcut keys. Let's say you do something you don't like. If you hit Control Z, you can basically undo what you did, or hit the undo button. Either way. All right, so once we've done that kind of, those two shapes look good. We can go ahead and click and drag a box, like we're selecting multiple pictures. We've selected both objects. Okay, we've got two objects selected. Now we see this button becomes available to us. This is a group or merge button. So if we click that, the two objects will now become one object. Look at that. So now we have a nice curve to our rectangle. Okay, so now we're going to take one of the basic shapes. This is a cylinder, but it's got some dashes through it. This is what Tinkercad calls a negative object. Okay, so we drag the cylinder into the space. I'm just going to hit undo. And you can see it's kind of just in there. It acts just like an object, but I'm just going to put it in here. Okay, and because it's a negative object, what it does is when we group it, it creates a hole. So we're going to select the two. Then we're going to click merge or group again. And there we go. It took the negative object and merged it with this solid object and created this hole punch. That's going to be good for our keychain. So the last step that we are going to do is we are going to add our names, a text to this keychain thing. So we're going to click the drop-down menu over here and select text and numbers. And we see there's this text. There's all sorts of letters too, but the text is nice. So we can drag that out here. Now, one thing about this is whenever you select an object, you have options for that specific object in this drop-down menu. So we can, for instance, change the color, which isn't fully necessary with 3D printing because we select the color of the 3D print later on in the process, but we'll just keep it red for now. All sorts of different things. We can add kind of some editing to the text. Just different types of modifiers you'll typically see within this kind of editing drop-down menu for each object. But for the text object, we get this text option. So if I were to add my name, it'll just type it out for me, which is really nice. So I'm just going to shrink this down a bit, get it to a good size. And then you see if I put it here, it's not sticking to the top. So in order to do that, we're going to have to select this black arrow. Every object you can select this black arrow on. And what this does is it lifts it up in the virtual space. So like it's floating, just like that. So I'm just going to raise it up just a bit like that. So it's hovering over. And that way I can fit it to my keychain. Shrink it down just a bit. Another cool thing about the text object is you can change the font. So, there's a few options. I'm sure there's a way to add more. All right, so once I feel like I've got that in a good spot, just kind of extruded. Our last step will be to, you guessed it, just to group these objects together. So I selected, dragged a box, and click group. All right, so now this is all just one solid object, and we are all set for our 3D model. So as I mentioned before, we have a 3D model, right? This 3D model is a file, and it will need to be sent to a 3D printer that prints the file, just like a regular printer prints a piece of paper. Wow, that's a tongue twister, isn't it? So we are going to just go up to this button, and it says export, right? Download and 3D print. So when we click export, usually these options are fine, but the 3D print file we want to do is an STL file. That's typically better for 3D printing. So we click on STL, and it is going to go ahead and start to download. Now, the thing about Tinkercad is that it auto names your objects. So before I downloaded it, I could have named it like name tag on the thing up here. And if I hit export, click STL, there, now my file is named name tag. That's probably better to stay organized. So once you have that, that is going to be in your downloads folder on your computer. So it'll be waiting for you in that folder. So in order to 3D print this with the Eagle Library specifically, or with any kind of 3D printer, like I said, we're going to take that file, send it to a 3D printer. If you have a 3D printer at home, it's going to ask for an STL file. You can put it on a flash drive. You can connect the 3D printer to your computer, and it will have a program that communicates with that printer. And it's basically just a program that says, give us an STL file so that we can print it on your 3D printer. So you can do all the operations yourself at home, because typically 3D printers come with a program that communicates with the printer to print the file. So you're basically just clicking and dragging a file into the printer and clicking print. So 3D printing itself is very simple in the fact that you just click print and it starts to print your object. So for us at the Eagle Library, you're going to go to eaglelibrary.org, eaglepubliclibrary.org, excuse me. And we have a 3D printing tab right here on our homepage. So just click that. And we've got some things to kind of read through, some options for you. As I mentioned before, there's different ways of 3D printing models. We created our own 3D model, but you can go to Thingiverse, Pinshape, or myminifactory.com. These are places to find models that people have already made. For instance, if you want like a little figurine of a character that you like, you can probably search for it on Thingiverse, and odds are that it's there, and you can just download it for free because it's an open source network of creators. It's a really good community of people that really just want to share the work that they do. Um, so, get your 3D model file ready. In our case, we have ours that we downloaded from Tinkercad, right? We do have some choices. These do kind of change over time, so just keep that in mind. We'll make sure to email you if we don't have something available. See, it says must be either STL or OBJ. OBJ was one of our options. Perfectly fine. I'm sure we can work around it, but if we do have an issue with the OBJ, we'll send you an email to try the STL file instead. Yeah, we do not print 3D prints that are outside of our business hours. Typically, an 8 to 12-hour print is something big, but it's better to kind of print things in smaller amounts anyways. The prints just turn out much better if they're in small sections. So if you have a big project, give us the files in separate files so that they can be smaller pieces printed at over time, right? So you're gonna put your name, your library card number, your email and or phone number. Generally, the object size should be already determined. So if it's coming from another website, you can just say object to scale or object size already determined. Or if you generally just want to make sure we get the clear idea of how big it is, that's totally fine. You can just say, like we mentioned, this was supposed to be, looks like it changed a bit over when we were editing it, but it looks like it's 85 by 30 and 24 height. So, we could do 84 by 30 by, what was it, 24? Something like that would be fine. We should be able to kind of decrypt the different dimensions of that, or it would actually be a little more specific if it was like length by width by height, maybe. Like I said, something to just kind of describe the dimensions, or which the nice thing about Tinkercad is it keeps the objects to scale when it goes to 3D printing. So you could just say object to scale, right? Or object size already set, something like that. Determined. Anything works really, just to give us a clear idea. It helps. Filament color, here we go. This is where we pick the color. So you just pick something you like. We already picked red, but even though the file in Tinkercad is red, that doesn't mean it has to be red. So we could do blue if we wanted. Now, the URL is if you're using like Thingiverse link and you didn't download the file, that's fine. If you already have the file, just upload it. You'll click upload file. You'll find it in your computer downloads folder and you'll select it. So you hit upload, and then it's gonna have you go through your computer to look for it. And any other additional information you'd like to pass on, like using support material or Rafts. Rafts are a base layer. Usually we print that as standard just to make sure the print turns out fine. It does not affect the model. It's there to keep the model from moving around on the 3D printer. Usually it's there just to for our end, and then we toss it after we're done. But it just ensures that your print turns out the best quality. So any other things like please print to, maybe, that's okay. Stuff like that, or if you have a certain orientation you'd like it printed, that's fine. We will just print it how it comes, or we'll try and determine the best. Like if you give us a model that's like this, standing like upwards, which is perfectly fine, we are probably going to tilt it on its side because that's going to be the best orientation for when we print it. It's going to be better that it's flat like that. So we may go in and orient it the best way it's needed to be 3D printed. You'll do a quick little CAPTCHA thing where just to make sure you're not a robot, which I'm sure you're not, and then hit submit request, and you will be emailed or phone called when your 3D print is ready. The wait time is it does change over time. Sometimes we have a lot of orders to print, so it may take longer for yours to be completed. Sometimes we're all caught up on our orders and it may be printed within 1 to 2 weeks. It really is just determining, it's determined based on how much we have on our queue of 3D prints. Also, just keep in mind, it is 7 cents per gram or 13 cents, depending on if we use a different type of filament. But we're sticking with 7 cents typically. And so what that means is, 3D prints, they use material, that material is weighed. It's determined in our 3D printer, but something like this would be less than $1. It would be somewhere probably around, I'd say 3 or 4 grams, maybe less. Pretty small. So less than $1 is probably something like this. So just keep that in mind, and we will charge your library account, and you can pay that online at any time through the Eco Library My Account page. So that being said, if you guys have any questions on this part, you can give us a call and we can do our best to answer the question on how to submit this or how to find the submission page. All right, so it looks like this 3D model turned out pretty okay. So I think it was good that we laid it down on its back so that the detail on the letters can turn out really nice. Sometimes with an object like this, like a key ring or a keychain with some type of ring structure, you might want to think about creating the thickness a little more because they do tend to snap under a lot of pressure if they're not thick enough. So that might be something to think about for future iterations. A big part of 3D printing is trial and error. So anyways, if you guys end up doing this or have any questions about 3D printing or 3D modeling, leave a comment down below, and we'll do our best to get back to you with any of those questions, or just reach out to any of us at the library and we'd be happy to route you to the right person to talk to, whether that be me or someone else. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. And again, just let us know if you need anything else. Okay, bye everyone.